Now that we're done with mocking, let's go ahead and close mail.js and account.js, and we can collapse those directories as well, just to free up a bit of space in the sidebar. And what we're going to do from here is write just a few more tests related to the user. Then in the next lesson, we'll write some tests focused on our tasks. Now, there are a couple of new techniques we need to explore to add some new tools to our tool belt, and one is figuring out how we can send a file using supertest. So what I'm going to do is send an image off to my upload avatar endpoint, and I'll make sure that I do get a buffer stored in the avatar field in the database. So to get that done, let's go ahead and kick things off by creating the brand new test case. I'll call test right here, providing a name, something like should upload avatar image. Then I can set this test up as an async function down below. Now, one thing we're going to need to do is get access to an image that we can upload in the test cases. Now, to do this, what we're going to do is create a new directory in our tests folder. This is a directory we'll be using right now, as well as in the next lesson for something kind of different. And this directory is going to be called fixtures. In the testing world, a fixture, or fixtures plural, are things that allow you to set up the environment your tests are going to run in. So what we're going to do is put an image inside of this directory that our tests can use when they're trying to upload an image to the server to test that endpoint. Now, if you remember from earlier in the class, I did provide you with a bunch of sample images that we had used to test things out using Postman. We're just going to grab one of those and use it for this as well. Now, if you don't have those, you can find those over at links.mead.io/files. This is exactly where we grabbed them from a few sections ago. You can download the Node course images zip, extract it, and get those images. Now, I still have that on my machine, so what I'm going to do is add an image into the fixtures directory. I'll crack open my Finder on the Mac or the File Explorer, depending on your operating system. I have that directory in my downloads folder, and right here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and grab profilepic.jpg. So that is sitting right here. That is the robot picture. I'm going to use Command-C to copy that to the clipboard, though you could always right-click if you do not know the keyboard shortcut for your operating system. We want to copy that file and bring it over to our fixtures directory. Now, right here, I have that on the desktop. That is Node Course Task Manager. That is tests followed by fixtures. Right here, this is where I want to put that file. So I will paste it using either the keyboard shortcut or the right-click menu. Now we can close down the Finder or File Explorer, and inside of the fixtures folder, we should have an image that we can use when testing that upload route. As long as you're seeing an image inside of here, then you're ready to actually fill out this test case. Now, to get started, it's going to look very similar to what we've done with our other test cases. I'll be using await with supertest. So I'll call request passing the app in. Then we're going to specify the HTTP method. Here we are trying to use post with the following URL. That is /users/me/avatar. Now, in this case, we do want to be authenticated, so we'll go ahead and set that up as well. Just down below, I'll use set to configure this, and we're going to set up authorization using, as always, an ES6 template string. We have bearer space. Then we use the ES6 template string syntax to interpolate the following value, that is user1.tokens. We're going to grab that first token object and grab the token property off of it, exactly like we had done up above for the other test cases. Now that we have the token set, what we want to do is also attach the avatar field. Remember, that is the one we're looking for. To do that, we use .attach. Attach is provided by supertest, allowing us to attach files. So right here, what we do if we want to attach a file is provide two arguments, both are strings. The first is the form field we're trying to set. Now, our server is configured to look for avatar, We also configured this when sending the image via Postman. And in this case, the second is the path to the file. And this starts from the root of our project. So for us, that would be tests/fixtures/profile-pic.jpg. So that is going to correctly upload that file to the following endpoint. And what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to expect that I get a 200 back, meaning that everything went well. Let's go ahead and start here first, then we'll focus on adding a couple of other assertions down below. Right here, I'll go ahead and save the test suite, and in a moment we should see 14 passing tests down below, and that is exactly what we get. Now we could continue on to write other assertions, and for this particular test case, we can figure out what makes sense. Now, we can't compare the binary data for this image directly with what's stored in the database because remember, we do use that sharp npm module to manipulate the image. Now, if we wanted to, we could load this file in using the fs module. I could manipulate it using these same techniques and then compare the binary data, but that is definitely overkill. What we're going to do is just check that binary data was indeed saved. That's a great place to start. So right here, we're going to grab the user, const user equals, await with user.findById, and we're just looking for user1id as we had done before. Now, there's one important thing we need to talk about when it comes to our assertions. And to illustrate this, let's use expect. What I'm going to do is expect this empty object to be this empty object, and it's going to fail. Let's go ahead and see it fail first, then we'll talk about why it's failing. So down below, I can see I expected this and I received this. Now, this doesn't seem to make much sense because we have the exact same thing. What's important to note is that to_be uses the triple equality operator provided by JavaScript. So when you first learn about if statements in JavaScript, you learn about the equality operator. Now you know that 1 is indeed equal to 1. So this is why if I use expect and to_be with these numbers, it would work. But you also learn that objects are not equal to other objects, even if they have these same properties. When we're checking objects for equality, it's checking to see if it's the exact same object in memory, and in this case, it is not. I'm creating two distinct objects, even though they have these same properties. So if we want to compare objects using expect, we can't use to_be. The good news, though, is that we can just switch over to to_equal. To_equal does not use the triple equality operator. Instead, it uses an algorithm, which is going to look at the properties on the object and compare those. And in this case, I would expect those two to be equal. Down below, the test suite is rerunning, and now we're getting a passing test suite. So once again, the whole purpose of bringing this up is to just show you that there are times where to_be is not going to work as expected when working with objects. To_equal is what you want. Now what we're going to do is check the data stored on user. Right here, we're going to look at user.avatar. That is where the binary data should be stored, and we're going to check if it's equal to something. Now, we don't have that real something. We just want to see if it's a buffer, if it's binary data stored in a buffer, and expect gives us a way to get that done. Right here, we can pass in to_equal expect.any. This takes in the constructor function for some sort of type, and it's going to check if what you're looking at is indeed of that type. And right here, we're going to check if it's a buffer. Now we could use expect.any with string to check if it's any string, or with something like number to check if it's any number. In this case, we want to go ahead and use capital B buffer. So once again, we're looking at that avatar property and we're checking if it equals any buffer. If it does, great. If it does not, that's a problem because the image hasn't been uploaded correctly. Down below, all we're going to do is save the user test suite to see what happens. The test suite is rerunning. We should have those 14 passing tests, and that is exactly what we end up getting. Now that we've messed around with a few other techniques allowing us to write test cases, you're going to go ahead and write a couple on your own as the challenge for the video. So down below, let's go ahead and talk about what I'd like you to do. Right here, you'll be creating 2 test cases for testing update functionality. So 1, create should update valid user fields. Try to update something like the user's name. So up above, I believe for my test user, I have the name Mike. I'll change that to something else. Then I'm going to actually find the user in the database and make sure the name has changed. So this makes sure that things go well when you're authenticated and you're changing a valid field. Down below, create should not update invalid user fields. So in this case, I could try to update something like location, which doesn't exist, and I would expect the correct error status code. And you can always refer to the JavaScript code we wrote for that route if you forget what the status code was. Last up, test your work. With the new test cases in place, save the test suite, and you should go from 14 passing tests to 16, and that'll be where we stop for now. Take some time to get this done. When you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? Let's get to it just down below with our first one. Right here, a new test with the name should update. Right here, valid user fields, and we're going to try to update the name. Let's go ahead and try to spell things correctly. There we go. Now this will be an async function, and we will set it up as such, and the first thing we're going to do is fire off this request. So what I'll do is use await calling request once again, a theme amongst our tests that test our API. We'll pass in the application and we'll set up our call. Now right here, we want to use a patch. So that is .patch, exactly what we used in Express when setting the endpoint up. And the actual path is /users/me to update your user profile. Next up, we want to make sure we're sending some data. So let's go ahead and use send to send our JSON request body. And I will update the name. I'll go from Mike to Jess, or at least I'll try to. Next up, we'll go ahead and set up our expect call. So .expect, expecting a 200 right here. Now with this in place, things should at least be passing so we can save the test suite, though we're still going to go ahead and check the data to see if that's been changed. Down below, I did forget to add the authentication token on, so I can see the test is failing, and that's okay. I'll just make sure to add it in right here, .set. It's okay if you don't type everything out and hit the home run right away. Sometimes you have typos and you have to write a little code, rerun it again to get things working. That's perfectly normal. So right here, set authorization. We're going to go ahead and set that equal to what we've been using before, bearer with the space followed by that user token, user1.tokens, grabbing the first item and then grabbing its token property. So now I would expect things to be working if I go ahead and save that file. Down below, the suite is rerunning and it looks like we're all set. Now we can move on to the second part for this test case, fetching that user and confirming the name has changed. So const user. We'll use await with user.findById again, grabbing that test user. User1 ID is the ID of the user we're looking for. And down below, I'm going to expect something about the user name field. I'm going to expect it to be Jess. Now, in this case, we are comparing something that would work with to_be, but if we wanted to, we could use to_equal as well. That would work just as well. So typically, I'll find myself using just to_equal and not using to_be at all. Right here, I'm going to provide what I expect, which would be Jess. Now we can save this test case, and if that one is passing, we can move on to the second test case for the challenge. Down below it is, so let's create that second test. Should not update invalid user fields. So to get started, let's go ahead and grab this entire test case, copy it to the clipboard and paste it down below. Now we can just go ahead and edit this to fit our needs. So for example, I'm going to change the name right here. Should not update invalid user fields. Then down below, we'll make some changes to the request as well. For example, I don't want to send name, I want to send something else like location, and I'll try to set that equal to Philadelphia, even though it's not a field that we can set. And next up, we'll change what we're expecting down below in terms of a status code. Right here, we're going to expect a 400, which is what we would get back if we tried to update an invalid field. Now, down here, there's no need to do anything like find the user and make sure that their name did not change. You could do that if you wanted to, but that would definitely be overkill. All right, right here, the test is running. We can see that everything is passing so far, and now we have 16 passing tests. So with this in place, we've covered all of the basic techniques necessary for testing. We know how to test our requests with or without authentication. We know how to mock libraries and how to check the database to make sure everything's went as expected. And with this in place, what I'd like to do to wrap up the section is do something similar for our tasks. We'll figure out how we can create some task data for our test user, and then we'll write some tests for a couple of those endpoints as well, using what we've already learned. So there's not a lot of new information to cover, but we are going to get a bit more experience working with testing and creating tests, then we'll be done with the section. I'm excited to get to that, so let's jump right in to the next one.